Hello, everyone. We want to welcome you to our webinar today. We are excited to have Jerome from To Control with us today. Jerome will be presenting on In Control with Dynamics. And before I pass it over to him, I would like to let you know that we are recording this session and it will be posted to our on-demand webinar library for you to review and share with anyone. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to type those in the questions box and we will get them answered during our Q&A time at the end of our session. And now I will pass it on to Jerome to kick off our presentation.
Okay, Angie, thank you very much for this introduction. Very excited to be in this presentation and to show some of our software. My name is Jerome de Klerk, and I'm from the Netherlands, and I am an IS auditor with To Control. So for bandwidth purposes, I'm gonna turn off my camera and go to my slideshow. So who is To Control? To Control is a IS auditor firm with IS auditor, but we also create some software for Dynamics Business Central and Dynamics NAV. And we've been doing that for quite a while, and I'm going to show you some of that software today. And the main purpose is, from our IS auditor perspective, we try to enhance the internal control and the security in the Dynamics environment. Well, the photograph on the screen is our lovely office in the south of the Netherlands. We've been doing this over 13 years, several countries, and some of the names of our customers, most of them are Dutch, so I'm gonna skip this to our To Control software suite. I just have a small presentation. I want to spend most of the time presenting our software. And our software is made up on top of the Dynamics stack. It's the web application Authorization Box, in which is used to manage and to monitor the authorization setup in Dynamics. In Dynamics Business Central, I'm going to show you the field security and the filter security, which is meant to refine the authorizations within the Business Central environment, where you normally can only authorize a complete table or a complete entity. You can use field security and filter security to secure specific fields within an entity. And I'm going to show you that. Well, at the end, we have the field validation on the right-hand side. Field validation is the application to ensure the quality of data entry. So it's not actually a security tool, but it will help you to ensure the quality of your data. So these are the tools I want to show you today. And when I go to the next slide, then you see what we call the authorization cycle. And I will come back to this slide several times to see where I am at in the presentation. The authorization cycle starts off with the design of the authorization framework. And in our point of view, it's necessary you want to achieve role-based access control, so RBAC. And that means that we have organization roles defined. And at these organization roles, we assign permission sets, so we know what tasks can be done by those organization roles. And then we assign the organization roles to users in your Business Central environment. That is what we do in the design phase. The management phase is the day-to-day management of employees entering your company and leaving your company. The authorization box will support this workflow with an authorization request, and I will show you that in a moment. And finally, we come to the monitoring of authorizations. This is used to ask simple functional questions to the users, to the Business Central environment. So questions like who is able to change the vendor bank account, and the system will give an insight in that question. Any conclusions coming from that might lead to readjusting the authorization framework, and that makes it an authorization cycle. So enough of the slides. I'm going to switch to my authorization box. As you can see, it's just a web application in which you log in. I will maximize the screen for a better view and try to enlarge it a little like this. Now I'm going to start off with the authorization framework, the top of the slide that I showed you a moment ago. And we defined the authorization framework like an organization chart. It's just a visualization of all the organization roles you have in the Dynamics environment. So we have several departments like the finance department, the sales department, the purchase department. And within these departments, we have organization roles like the account manager. And when I added one of those roles, then you can see that we have the account manager, and to the account manager, we have assigned permission sets. These permission sets come directly from my Business Central environment that is linked to this authorization box account. So I can browse through those, and these are the permissions that are attached to the account manager. So once I assign this organization role account manager to a user, then that user will have these permissions in Business Central. And in this example, John and Anne both have the role account manager. I can view this from another perspective as well. When I go to the user management and look at the users, I can search for John. And when I open this user, then I can see not only the username, but also the organization roles that are assigned to this user. As we saw earlier, that was the account manager. And we can see all the permission sets that are assigned to this user by this organization role. Back to the authorization framework. Over here, I have an export-import button, and that is used to make an overview of that organization framework that I showed you earlier. It downloaded an Excel file down here. And when I open that, now we'll enlarge that for some better view. And you can see here in the columns all the organization roles that you saw in the organization chart, and you see all the permission sets in the lines. And there where the X's are, of course, is the permission sets that are assigned to a specific organization role. On the second tab, we can see all the users that are in my database. And over here, I see the same organization roles. And again, the X's mark there where the roles are assigned. So this Excel sheet is an excellent way to show your finance department or to show your auditor how the organization of how the authorizations are set up in Business Central. But not only you can use it as an overview, you're also able to make some changes over here. So if, for example, I filter on the head of finance, then I can see all the permission sets that are assigned to the head of finance. And if I don't want the head of finance to edit the employees, then I just enter a minus in here. And well, if I say I want the application manager to do that, then I just enter a plus sign in here. And back to the authorization box, I can import again this structure. And when I import the sheet, all the pluses and the minuses will be processed by the authorization box, and the authorizations will be adjusted accordingly. So just a quick peek back to my organization cycle. The design of the authorizations is in the Authorization Framework, which I showed you in a moment, and I will now just a moment ago, and I will now move to the management, and that's the day-to-day management of user rights. Every change in authorizations is done by an authorization request. I will create a new one. First, I select a user. For example, I will take the John, the salesperson. We had him earlier. When I open this, then I can see the organization roles that are already attached to John. As you can see, he is account manager. We saw that earlier, and as well, he will be business unit manager, but that won't start until the 5th of May, of the 1st of May. I can simply revoke these rights by tapping the X. And as you see, this one is to be deleted, and I can add new organization roles. For example, he's going to be a sales account manager. Now that's already there. A service employee for a period of time. I can set a period when it will start. For example, the 1st of May. And I can set also an end date, and that is very powerful because often what's forgotten is to revoke the rights once a person leaves the office or the temporary access rights are no longer needed. And this will make sure that by the end of May, the rights will automatically be revoked. Of course, I can choose a company in which these rights are applicable. Now, once I save this, and we see the new setup, we see that he is an account manager. He also, the business unit manager rights will be revoked, and the service employee rights will be added. The only thing I have to do to process these rights, to make sure that they are available in Business Central, is press the button Process. It's also possible to define a workflow where a controller or a department chief has to, department manager has to approve this authorization request before it's processed. So in that case, I won't have the process button, but I will have send a approval request. But if I press process now, then these permissions will be effective in Business Central. As soon as the 1st of May passes, and by the end of May, these rights will be revoked again. So back to my cycle. I showed you the design. I showed you the management. You can use an authorization request to give people rights in your Business Central administration, and you can use it to revoke rights. Before I go to the monitoring part, which I will handle in at the end of the presentation, I will step out to how you set up the authorizations and how you can refine those with the Field Security app. So back to my authorization box for a moment. Here in the Authorization Framework, I also have an overview of all the permission sets. This is the view you're used to, which you can also see in the Dynamics environment itself. So if I open one of these permission sets like this one, and you get a similar view as you get in Business Central itself. You see the objects and the permissions that are applicable for this permission set. I have also some information of every user that's using this permission set and every organization role. I cannot change the permission set here, but we do have a advanced recorder This comes on top on the standard recorder that is in Dynamics. It's not functional in this environment, but when it is, why is it enhanced? It's enhanced because I can record any user. I can choose the user I want to record, and not only the user that's on this system I'm working on right now, which is possible with the standard recorder. And it will also do some cleanup before it saves the permission set, making sure that we have only the permissions that are strictly necessary within the tasks we're recording. So it's an easier way to record permissions by the enhanced permission recorder. Okay, that's what we have in the authorization box for the design. I'm now switching to my Business Central environment to show you our field validation and field security app, which makes it possible to refine the authorization setup. So I have a scenario set up in which I'm a purchaser, and as a purchaser, I'm allowed to change some things on the item card. Well, that was one click too much. Okay. So for example, if I open this item, then I'm able to change everything that's related to purchase. So in this example, I can change the vendor item number. Let's say that is 0, like this. And when I leave the item card, then that's quite okay with the system. But if I open the same item again, then I'll try to change, for example, the description. Then you see I get a specific error that I don't have permission to modify this field because of field security. So that's our field security app. And I will give you a quick peek how it's done. So this is the setup of the security I showed you a moment ago. As you can see, we can enter this on any table that's in the system, and not only the standard dynamic tables, but also any customization that's in your database. I can choose if I want this entity to be default editable or just the other way around, like it is now, that it's not editable. And then I specify the fields over here that are editable. As I showed you, the vendor item number was editable to me. I also have to define several fields that will be standard changed when I change the item, because I must have the right to do so as well. And finally, why is it applicable for me? That's because there are permission sets linked to this field, and one of these permission sets are linked, excuse me, one of these permission sets are linked to my user, making that I have the restrictions by this field security. Well, you can easily think of an example when it's the other way around. Think of a customer card where you have a credit limit, and you may want to have employees to change everything on the customer card except the credit limit field. And then it's easier to define it the other way around. So that's the field security. I go back to my item list in the same scenario to show you the filter security. As you saw earlier, I was able to change anything with the inventory posting group raw material, but as a purchaser, there's no need that I change anything on a finished item. So when I choose a finished item and I go down here to the vendor item number, which I was able to change a moment ago, you will see that I am not able to change that right now. So if I release this screen, and you see I get an error saying that you are not allowed because of data of filter security. And it tells me that the inventory posting group should be raw material. I was able to change the raw material, and in this case, it's finished, and therefore I do not have the permissions to change this item. So again, I will give you an insight in how it's done. Filter security. Again, I can choose any table, any entity within your database you want. And in the line, I define when the entity, or when the item in this case is editable. And that is when the inventory posting group equals raw material. I can set up a more complex filter by using a second filter field. And here at the end, the same assigned permission sets, where I can see if I have one of these permission sets, then I will be restricted by this filter security. So you can set up for different departments, different filter securities as needed. So they can change different parts of different items. So where field security is to secure the fields within one item, one entity, the filter security is meant to restrict the changes to a specific subset of your total list. So in this case, actually, if I say filter to this value, and when the list is filtered to this value, and that are all the items that I'm able to change because of the filter security. Well, I think a very powerful tool to refine your authorizations, and not only as in standard Business Central be able to restrict only if they can change items or not. Before I return to the authorization box, I want to show you the field validation option. As I said earlier, it's not actually has to do with security, but with validating the data and ensuring the quality of the data. For that, I made an example on the customer card. Let's create a new one. Let's create a foreign customer. And let's assume I am a very lazy employee and think this is enough. And apparently, of course, it isn't enough if you want a good quality of data. So if I leave this this card, you see the field validation worksheet, field validation results. You see that I have set up several restrictions before I can validate this customer card. I have to enter a name, I have to enter an address, I have to enter a credit limit, and it has to be between 1 and 1,000. The phone number has to be exactly 10 in length. And the customers must at least have one or more ship to addresses. And also it checked for the dimension code salesperson, and it wasn't set because I only set a name, and therefore this sheet shows up, and I cannot continue before this is corrected. So again, I will show you how it's done. In this case, I have the customer. Well, I showed you earlier, I can select any table I want. I can select if I want to give a warning or an error. If I give an error, then the user won't be able to save anything. All the changes will be undone. I can choose to give a warning, then the user can save, it gets the message as I showed you earlier, but he can save the changes he made. Well, to make sure that the data is still valid, we use the option to block the customer once it's created. We have the ability to set initial field values. So I can choose the field blocked. And set it to all. That means that the customer card will be blocked once it's opened. When I unblock it, then all these checks will be performed. And if I get an error, if I get a warning, then the customer card will be blocked again. In this way, I can give the user a warning, but he cannot use the customer until all the problems are solved. Until then, the customer card will be blocked. Well, as we saw, we have the possibility to check for dimensions. So if any default dimensions are set on the customer card, then the system will check if this is on. And we have the possibility to make some fields mandatory, to set a filter on the credit limit, to set a specific length, or to check a related table. This relates to the ship to address table, and the validation is that the value should be greater than 1. So at least one ship to address should be filled. And if I wish, I can give the user a notification in my own language, in my own company details. So for call for help 555. And the user, if he gets this error, then he will see that message and knows what to do. It's also possible to compare to related fields. For example, I can, in an order line, I could check the price that is entered with the price that's in the item table to make sure that it's higher than the price that's in the item table. So a lot of options to validate the quality of your data and to make sure that your data is entered the right way, and you won't get stuck later on in the process. Okay, these are the modules I want to show you in Business Central. Going back to my slide once more. The part I didn't show you is the monitoring slide. The monitoring, as I told you earlier, I have to go back to my authorization box. The monitoring is a module specifically for the finance department or the auditor to ask simple questions to the system. For example, if I filter on the high impact questions, is who can change a vendor bank account? Who can manage authorizations? Who can prepare a payment proposal? Well, these kind of questions can be asked to the system. And I can also ask the question if I have somebody who can change vendor bank account, and I have somebody who can change a payment proposal. Well, that's not good in point of view of in the segregation of duties. And in that case, I can get an alert that there is a conflicting duty involved. So I can see who has which permissions and what conflicting duties are in my system. That's done by a simple question. In the question, something is explained about the risks of these authorizations if they are not set up right. And you can set up these questions yourself, but we also provide you with a standard set of questions which are applicable to most financial administrations. And once I set up this question, it will be analyzed, and the system will inform me of how this is set up in my security and my authorization setup. And I will see that on all levels. So I see the organizational role, I see the permission sets with this permission, and I see the users that have that permission. So who can change vendor bank account? The answer to that question is Edward, the manager, can change the vendor bank account. Also, I can see that the head of finance can do so, and the employee accounts payable can do so. And as an auditor or as a controller at my finance department, I can review this question. So this was evaluated today by myself. And why was it evaluated? I can see here that the details. So why does this user has these permissions? Well, that's because he has these permission sets and these organization role. And what was the history of the review? This morning I reviewed it, and I agreed because the head of finance should be able to change this. So when I go back to my permissions, and I check who can change prepared payment proposal. Then I can see again all the organization role that has these rights, and I can see a user that is able to do this. And probably there are some more users. Yes, when I go to the next page, you can see there are some more users that can do so. And I see Edward, well, and that still has to be reviewed. So when I go to the review, then I can see simply why he's able to do so. Well, that's because all these permission sets have access to the payment proposal. And I can agree, disagree, or leave it at to review. The description is Edward should not be able to do this. So all the reviews that I disagree with are my action list. I can make a list of it, and I can discuss it in my organization. That this is not what I want. That is compromise of the segregation of duties and how we should deal with this. And when I save and close this, then I see that this is disagreed. And of course, the object of this is that next time when I review all the organization roles, all the critical permissions, then I only have to focus on everything that's disagreed the previous time and everything that is to be reviewed. So first it will be quite some work, but after you reviewed it once, you only have to look for the changes. Not only I can see the access rights, so what critical permissions are, but I can also see the conflicting critical permissions. So in this case, we're still at who can prepare a payment proposal. And you can see here that the payment proposal conflicts with who can create a vendor bank account. And again, I can see the organization role it's at, the permission set, and also the user. And again, I can review this to see whether that conflict is desirable or not. Perhaps I have some mitigating controls outside permissions, and that can be acceptable, but otherwise I have to resolve this conflict. Well, this means that once in a while the controller has to review all these critical permissions, but we also have a tool which is continuous monitoring. It's a separate tool from you can use in the authorization box. And here I can subscribe to specific critical permissions, to specific questions. So if I subscribe to this question, then as soon as anyone gets permissions to prepare a payment proposal, then I get an alert in my email notifying me that something's changed and that I have to review again and so it won't wait till the next half year or quarterly inspection. I get an immediate notification that something has changed. So that's with our new module, continuous monitoring. So now my circle, my authorization cycle is back to the beginning. We started with design. We had the day-to-day management, and we had the monitoring tool for the controller or the auditor. And in this monitoring, we concluded that some changes had to be made to the design, and then it starts all over again. So that completes the authorization cycle. Well, I think some very powerful tools to use. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Jerome. Yes, we do have a couple of questions that came through. Do you support older NAV versions than BC?
Yes, actually we do. As I showed you in an earlier slide, we're doing this for over 13 years. So we support from 2013 up. The authorization box is supported in these versions as well. Of course, we like to show our latest version in Business Central. Also, the field security app and the filter security are available in previous versions. Only the layout and some of the functionality might slightly differ, especially in the field validation and the quality control of the data. There are some differences. It's still called mandatory fields, and there are some differences. For example, in the older versions, not Business Central, I won't be able to check for default dimensions, but I will be able to check for mandatory fields and a specific value in a field.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that answers the question.
And if I end the subscription of AB, is my system then no longer secure?
Yeah, as I understand, if I understand the question correctly, then once the subscription ends of Authorization Box, as I told you, it's a web application. Will my NAV environment still be secure? Yes, it will be. It's only a shell over the standard authorization setup, so you will still be able to have the permissions in the Microsoft Dynamics environment. The permissions will still be assigned to the users. The only thing you're lacking is that you have no longer the organization roles making the goal-based access. And of course, you cannot longer use the monitoring and the process flow with authorization requests. But the security will still be on if the application is available or not.
Okay, thank you. And then, do you supply standard permission sets?
No, we have quite some experience in supporting organizations with setting up the permission sets. But what we often notice in these projects is that often there is some customization, or they're using a specific verticalization add-on, which alters the standard permissions and the standard processes. So basically, we start from scratch building the permission sets, but we have a method to, well, using the enhanced recorder and a way we set up permission sets to do that very quickly. But it's very hard to create standard permission sets.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I think those are all the questions that we had for you today. If anybody has any additional questions, please feel free to contact us. or if you want to contact your account manager, you may go ahead and do so. All right, Jerome, well, thank you for presenting today, and to everyone on today's webinar, or if you are watching on demand, we thank you for joining us. And I just want to let you know that we do have a few more webinars coming soon. This afternoon, we have True Commerce presenting on Will You Take Advantage of a Commerce Network? And then next Tuesday, we have Lisa Doran from Innovia Consulting, and she's going to be presenting on cash flow forecasting in under 30 minutes. So check out our website for more of our upcoming events, and that's innovia.com/events. And Innovia has a podcast going on. If you have not heard of it already, it's called the Innovia Conversation. And we just want to encourage you to listen to our selection that Steve and Jeff have provided to us over the last year. They do about 2 episodes a month, and you can find out about all the different podcast platforms to listen to on our podcast page, and that's innovia.com/podcast. So check out our selection and subscribe so you'll be notified when those new episodes air. Right, well, thank you again, Jerome, for presenting today. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure doing it. So.
All right, well, we look forward to seeing you all again soon on another Innovia webinar. Take care and have a great day.